She learned there were 5 chilling empath types that outsmart manipulators. On the same night, she almost apologized for something she didn't do. The draft text blinked like a trap. Her thumb hovered, then fell away. She closed the message, opened the voice memo app, and recorded the silence instead. Proof that she could let a moment breathe without feeding an evil mind. Kasha Vale worked late in a downtown records office where the lights hummed and the carpet held the tread of 1,000 tired commutes. Files, dates, signatures, little rooms of human behavior where people tried to sound better than they felt. She liked counting what could be counted. It calmed the weather inside her. But all day her phone pulsed with small alarms. He was posting again. He was tagging mutual friends again. He was rewriting history in present tense. Adrian had that manipulation gift, that clean tone that took up air and left her doubting her own lungs. For years she mistook his confidence for care. Empathy had been into emotional control because she had not learned which parts of herself were not for sharing. When she got home, the apartment's quiet met her like a steady animal. The kitchen smelled faintly of soap. The hall light made a soft coin on the floor. She placed her phone in a drawer and left it closed like a door that had earned rest. In the bathroom mirror, her face looked older in a true way, as if someone had turned up the exposure on who she really was. She thought about the phrase a stranger had dropped into her DMs that morning dark psychology isn't a monster in a book. It is a person who learned to harvest kindness. The message wasn't a threat, but a map. She poured water into a glass and did not spill a drop. Small competence steadied her hands. She opened the laptop and searched phrases she never let herself type. Intermittent reinforcement, guilt grooming, image management, reactive bait. Each term snapped into place like a hidden hinge. She read clinical lines until they softened into human ones, human behavior around pain, patterned into habit, then into harm. Her own name was nowhere on the page, but her body nodded as if called. She remembered the first time Adrian tested her. He arrived late with a story that folded on itself like a napkin. She had cooked, waited, excused, assured, and then thanked him for finally arriving, the way a captive thanks weather for changing. Later, he said she was so understanding, and the compliment bit gently until it became a tag around her throat. He had not loved a person. He had loved a resource. She had not loved a person. She had loved a promise. Tonight the promise died. Not loudly. Not with a message she could screenshot. It died in the private way some storms end, leaving branches to be gathered by whoever lives there. She began an inventory, not a list for the internet, but a personal field guide. She titled the file Quiet Weapons. The first weapon was observational patience, not the patience that waits to be rescued, but the kind that lets reality run long enough to reveal itself. The second was pattern memory, a ledger of repeated moments that don't need an explanation because they already wrote one. The third was strategic silence, not stonewalling, not sulking silence that refuses to finance a lie. The fourth was reverse mirroring, offering back only what was asked, never what was demanded. The fifth was exit literacy, the ability to leave a room before a story turns you into scenery. She looked at the words and felt something shift in her spine. A new posture that didn't ask permission from anyone who had proven themselves careless. She closed the laptop and stepped onto the small balcony. Night was unbranded, no posts, no screens, only windows holding people-shaped lanterns. She held the rail and let the air cool the heat behind her eyes. Across the courtyard, a neighbor watered a plant with the focus of a surgeon. The world still contained tenderness that did not require her blood. Her phone in the drawer thumped twice, then again, a rhythm designed to wake need. She did not open it. She brushed her teeth and cleaned the sink. She wiped the mirror with a towel and didn't study herself for flaws, only for aliveness. In bed, she turned on a single lamp, and read half a page of a worn paperback until her breaths matched the sentences. Sleep came like a visitor who did not need anything from her. She woke at 3:11 to the soft scrape of metal on metal. Her body sat up before her mind did. The sound returned, one steady slide against the deadbolt. The small alarm Noel from HR had pressed into her palm last week trembled on the nightstand like it also had a pulse. She didn't grab it. She went still. A shadow smudged the gap under the door, then moved away, slow and certain. Not a break-in, not a rush, just a message. I can touch your edges. The heat rose in her face, not from fear, from clarity. She padded barefoot to the door and looked through the peephole. The hall was a hallway. The lock was a lock. She breathed and pressed her forehead to the wood until the thudding behind. Her eyes slowed to a human drum. She made tea at 3:20 a.m. because responsibility kept its hours even in the dark. The kettle whistled gently. The cup warmed her fingers, and the bitterness steadied her like a truth you don't have to enjoy to respect. She opened the drawer and checked the phone. Adrian had posted a black screen and a poem that wasn't his. Then a caption about people who betray healing by refusing difficult conversations. She almost laughed. Evil minds advertise free therapy when they need new donors. She turned the phone face down again and wrote in the quiet weapons file. If a person is only gentle when you are useful, you are not in love. You are on payroll, dot by dawn. A pale line of light cut the opposite wall in two. Kasia lay on the floor and let her shoulder blades find the cool of the wood. The city began its shuffle outside. Someone ran for a bus. A child asked a question only morning could answer. She watched the ceiling and understood a simple thing she had never said out loud. She was not an endless well. Wells have walls so water can rise. When she finally checked the door, a thin white card waited on the mat. No handwriting, just a printed sentence. The one you are becoming doesn't tolerate this. She turned it over. Blank. This sentence could be threat or blessing. It was both. She slid the card into the quiet weapons folder and left for work early, walking a few blocks longer than usual just to stamp her body onto a map she still owned dot at her desk. She stacked files into tidy towers and built small islands of order. She answered emails like a person who knew her own signature. She did not respond to Adrian's voicemail count, did not click his apology link, did not offer him the dignity of rescue. By noon, she felt the shape of a new day in her chest, the kind that asks you to be a witness first, then a participant. On her break, another card arrived in her inbox, an anonymous form submission through the office website. It read, "Inventory is a kind of prayer. Keep counting." The phrase chilled then warmed her, like opening a hotel window in winter. If someone was watching, they would see her do ordinary things for a while. Fill a stapler, refill a pitcher, refuse a narrative. Sometimes dark psychology loses not by argument, but by running out of audience. That night she backed up the quiet weapons file, printed a copy, and slid it under the lining of her tote. The mirror held her gaze without negotiation. She whispered to the reflection the same sentence on the card, but as instruction, not threat. The one you are becoming doesn't tolerate this. A small smile found her mouth in a way that did not ask permission from anyone else's story. In bed, she slept with the lamp off for the first time in months. The hallway stayed a hallway. The lock stayed a lock. The night, no longer a witness stand, turned into weather again. Kasia carried the card all morning like a coin that burned through fabric. She kept touching the tote seam the way people touch scars, not to open them, but to confirm the border held. Work moved in measured lines. Her eyes moved faster. Every time her screen dimmed, it threw back a version of her that looked more awake than the day before dawn. No one teaches empaths to outsmart manipulators. They teach us to forgive. The sentence formed on its own and landed with weight. Forgiveness wasn't the problem. Timing was. She looked at the old calendar notification Adrian had set to repeat years ago. Check-in. U.S. versus. Stress, and deleted it with a click that felt like she had moved furniture. At lunch, she walked to the river, a steady gray ribbon stitching the city together. Runners, strollers, office refugees, human tide shaped by lunch breaks and weather apps. She stood by a railing where the paint peeled in honest curls and watched geese argue about nothing. Her breaths matched the water. She didn't notice the woman approach until a shadow touched the rail beside her. The stranger wore a navy coat and ordinary shoes. She had the kind of face the city forgets on purpose, gentle and closed. "You're Kasia," the woman said softly. The voice was careful, like someone carrying glass. "Do I know you?" Kasia kept her hands visible, not from fear, from principle. "I read your name on inter-office mail once," the woman answered. "My sister used to work where you do. I'm not here to scare you." Kasia scanned for lies the way a medic scans for bleeding. The woman's mouth held tension in one corner, grief stored like a script. "Then what are you here for?" "To warn you," the woman said. "He's trying different doors. He does that when the main one closes." Kasia didn't say Adrian's name. Saying it in public felt like kissing the ring. "And you?" The woman's eyes lifted to the water. "The last door he tried." She let the sentence hang. "My name is Mara." A coincidence of names from some other life Kasia had heard in anonymous stories. It didn't matter. The posture of truth is the same across cities. "I don't need saving," Kasia said. "I know," Mara answered. "I needed someone to say that to me too." It still mattered to hear it out loud. They stood a few feet apart and pretended the wind had introduced them. Mara spoke of tactics in plain words, how Adrian shifted between manipulation tones like stations on a dial. Victim, mentor, prophet, patient. How he used human behavior as theater time delays, public sorrow, private tests. How he framed emotional control as accountability, so he could keep the moral spotlight and absorb the applause. Kasia felt rage in her palms, not to use, to hold. This wasn't data points now. It was body memory. "Why tell me?" she asked. "Because when someone stops feeding him, he looks for someone who still thinks love is a pantry," Mara said. "He's trying you one more time because you won't panic on cue." Kasia thought of the soft scrape on her lock. She thought of the white card. She thought of the phrase that tasted like both omen and blessing. "The one you are becoming doesn't tolerate this. If he comes again, there will be witnesses," she said. "Half to Mara, half to the river." Mara nodded. As if passing a torch, she could not keep burning alone. "Make the witnesses patient, not loud," she advised. Predators need noise to hide in. They parted without exchanging numbers, because safety sometimes looks like untraceable kindness. Kasia walked back different, not harder. A line dot at her desk. She drafted a one-sentence boundary to send if needed. "Do not contact me again. Any attempt will be documented and reported." She didn't send it. She printed it and put it behind her ID badge like a spine. She informed building security, not for drama, for paper. She texted her downstairs neighbor, a retired nurse who made soup like a religion, and asked her to keep her porch light on an extra hour. "Of course, honey," came back with a soup emoji that warmed parts of the day. Internet COULDN, single quotes T.memory woke at strange times. In the copy room, the smell of toner pulled a scene from a shelf. Adrian coaching her on tone, telling her to preface every boundary with thanks so it landed softer. She had done it. Had thanked the man for not being gentle. The shame stung and then dulled into data. She wasn't that student anymore. She didn't hold the chalk dot near closing. HR called about an old complaint she'd filed, one she had forgotten under stronger weather. They were reviewing patterns. The word felt like a hug from a statistic. Kasia kept her face neutral and her voice steady. Patterns meant she wasn't the only one writing in this invisible ink. Dusk folded the city. She reached the apartment just as the first streetlights yawned awake. Inside, she arranged the room like a set that told the truth. Chair angled toward the door, lamp low, camera light solid. She put on music with strings and no lyrics. She cooked an egg and ate it slowly with pepper. She opened Quiet Weapons and reread the 5 lines until they became shorter. Watch, record, refuse, reflect. Leave dot at 9:52. The hallway caught footsteps. A pause. The card slot whispered. The alarm did not sound. No metal scraped. No lock argued. Kasia waited 1 full minute before opening the door. No one. Only the mat misaligned and a new white card in the seam. She flipped it with a pen and read. Accountability goes both ways. Meet me where you first apologized for existing. The last 4 words squeezed breath from her chest. The bench by the willow. The night they began. The night she thought consent meant pleasing a story. Her spine cooled. She set the card on the table and watched it as if it might move. Meeting was bait. Refusing a win. Ignoring, unrecorded. She texted the nurse downstairs. She texted security. She did not text Mara. Some kindnesses deserved rest. She wrote 1 more line in Quiet Weapons. Control is a choreography. Change the music dot at 10:30. She walked to the willow in a slow street where families washed dishes and shows laughed through walls. Winter air had teeth but not fangs. She held her phone low, camera on, recording her own feet finding ground. The bench waited like a confession booth. No Adrian. A car idled and left. A couple crossed the street without looking at her. She sat. She let the wind move her hair and did nothing a script would predict. When she rose to leave, a woman stepped from the shadow of the tree and moved with purpose toward the curb. Navy coat, ordinary shoes. Mara. They looked at each other. Neither smiled. Thank you, Kasia said, even though no one had spoken. Mara shook her head, a brief denial, as if to say, this part is yours dot, as Kasia turned for home. Headlights swept the benches. A familiar posture appeared at the far end of the path, hands in pockets, chin up, voice ready. Adrian arrived late to a play she had canceled. She didn't look at him. She crossed the street with the small, undramatic grace of someone who knew the way back. He called her name once, like a key command. The night did not obey dot. She documented him from the corner. A clean shot, time-stamped. He walked in circles like a GPS failing. She kept moving. The lock clicked behind her with the simple honesty of metal meeting metal. She placed her phone on the table and watched the recording once. He looked smaller in pixels. Pixels did not applaud. Sleep found her early, standing in the doorway of her own life. She woke before dawn and knew the day had edges. The city hadn't stretched yet. Streets wore their thin veil of sleep. In the quiet kitchen, she watched the kettle and imagined one simple headline. Woman refuses part in someone else's story. It wouldn't trend. It would save a life. Her inbox held 2 new messages. The first was an HR update. Patterns confirmed. Next step documented. The second was a private number with a link and a caption. This is your side. Promise. She did not click. When power learns you stopped feeding it, it sends candy. She laced her shoes and walked the block twice before work, teaching her body that doors were not the only way in and out of a day. On the second lap, a car idled by the curb, then eased away. Familiar shape, familiar patience. She kept pace. A neighbor waved from their porch. The car turned. Attention without oxygen thins. At the office, a meeting attempted to take hostages, but minutes freed them. Her notes were clean. her posture quieter than usual. Not smaller, quieter like a library with windows. At lunch, she filed a simple police report, not for rescue, for record. The officer listened like a person who had learned too late what dark psychology costs a city. Kasia left without shaking. Near 5, HR called her back to hear next steps. She answered questions with the same tone she used to order coffee. After she hung up, she stood by the window and watched a bus stop empty fill empty again, human behavior choreographed by clocks. She remembered a winter years ago when she had thought love was catching the cold others carried because she couldn't stand to watch them shiver. She smiled without humor. That old generosity had been beautiful and wrong. Dusk again. The card under the door again. Same cut, same font. Last chance to be gracious. She held it up to the lamp until the paper warmed. Graciousness didn't ask for last chances. She slid the card into a zip bag with the others, lined like family photos from a life she didn't want to keep. Her phone buzzed twice. Nora from HR with a soup emoji tonight's porch light was on. Security had added a walkthrough. Her chest eased. Witnesses didn't remove danger. They removed its costume. At 9:13, the intercom clicked. No voice. Just a friction of breath too close to plastic. She didn't speak. Silence filled the tube with blanks he couldn't write on. The intercom clicked off. 2 minutes later, her phone rang. She let it travel to voicemail, where Adrian tried 3 languages of sorrow in 26 seconds. Nostalgic, moral, legal. She archived it. The evil mind doesn't need editing. It needs a pause button. At 10, a knock. Not the door, the window. She turned the lamp off and stood in the dark, letting her eyes adjust until the room had contours again. A shape moved beyond the glass, careful not to show its face. Sure, she would perform. She did not. The screen recorded from its small red eye and kept its own counsel. The figure stepped back and left. The room breathed. She thought of Mara often now, not as guardian, not as ghost, more like a lighthouse upriver whose beam passed every 6 seconds, just enough to prove the shore still existed. She wondered what it cost Mara to warn strangers. She wondered what part of herself had wanted to warn strangers too, and had been taught by someone like Adrian to call it dramatic. At 10:45. She wrote an email to herself and CC'd no one. Subject: leaving the stage. Body: he liked me best when I gave him props and clapped on cue. I'm out of the theater. My seat is by the door I own. She scheduled it to send in the morning because some truths need sleep. The next day began with a call from HR. Your statement helped confirm 3 reports. The phrase had the shape of justice without the song. Enough for now. She closed the file and held the edge of her desk, letting her hands believe the wood. She had not wanted revenge. She wanted inventory to matter. It did. On the walk home, she felt followed, not by footsteps, by expectation, the ghosty left in her muscles that asked, "Are you sure you won't perform?" She passed the willow and didn't look for him. She passed the bench and didn't let it turn into a shrine. She was almost home when a voice behind her tried on softness. Still doing this? Adrian's silhouette wore the streetlight like a spotlight. She stopped without turning. The calm found her first and wrapped her like a jacket that finally fit. "We could talk," he offered, the knife hidden under napkin. "We owe the years that." She pictured the 5 chilling empath types she had written into herself. Watch, remember, silence, mirror, exit. They rose like 5 chairs she could sit in any time. She chose the chair with the least ceremony exit and kept walking. A block later, he tried a louder key. "I'll explain why you're wrong." A block after that, he tested pity. "I'm not well." Then blame. "Look what you make me do." Then, finally, the quiet he once weaponized. He let it trail her like fog. At the building entrance, The retired nurse on the porch raised a hand without staring. The porch light filled their small piece of world with ordinary gold. Kasia turned the key and felt the metal answer like yes. Inside, she watched the hallway camera for a half-minute and saw Adrian watching the door watch him. She saved the clip and filed it where the other clips lived, in a folder named for something that was no longer his. My boundaries. She didn't cry. Not out of numbness, out of completion. Tears would come later, in sweet places, for different reasons. On the balcony, she breathed the kind of air that lives between storm and weather report. She wrote one last line into quiet weapons. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the refusal to continue auditions. She closed the file. She closed the night. She slept. The morning email she had scheduled arrived like a gift from an older sister she'd finally met. She read it twice and let it be true. When she opened the door to leave for work, there was no card. Her mat was only a mat. The hallway was only a hallway. She stood for a moment in that unremarkable holiness and smiled. The cost of leaving the stage was smaller than the cost of living on it. She paid and kept change. If this story made you think, subscribe for more dark truths. Because every mind hides what it fears most.